couple of realizations came at that point in time. And, one is that, I was approaching my fight against cancer in a non-sustainable type of way. It was all encompassing. First thing I woke up thinking about, last thing I thought about when I went to sleep. And even though I was working full time, it was a thought in my head. I was a newly diagnosed patient, for crying out loud. I began to realize that, I was using a paradigm of a capstone event. There was a game day, fight night, performance, a work deliverable or what have you. Yeah. Every day with a chronic disease is your day. Every day is game day. Every night is fight night. So I needed something sustainable.
I'd like to welcome to Living with Multiple Myeloma, Ray Hartjen. How are you doing today, Ray?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, Helena. How are you doing? That's the important thing.
I am also doing well, but we're going to talk about your multiple myeloma trip today. Not that I won't throw in some of my own stuff, but you are now 6 years post your diagnosis.
Yes.
How in general do you feel?
I feel good. I had treatment again yesterday, and treatment days, just another both, mental and physical little, bumps in the road. Mm-hmm. It's the physical reminder of yes, you have multiple myeloma. Yesterday I had a Kyprolis infused through an IV. And that, tends to make me a bit nauseous and fatigued for the rest of the day, and including today as well. I'll be a bit fatigued, but not nauseous, thankfully. And then, it's also another, mental hurdle to overcome when you have treatment, because there's days that, I don't really even think that much about being a multiple myeloma patient, but you certainly, you get jarred front and mind when you have to go to the infusion center, get an IV started and all that for treatment. But all in all, I feel fine. I am very susceptible to the powers of suggestion, though. It's every tweak in my back. I'm like, oh, is that a soft tissue tweak, or is that something wrong with my spine or a vertebrae or something like that? So every time I feel one of those, and sure enough, I sneezed earlier today and said, "Oh, my back hurts." And I'm like, nah, I think if I'm sneezing, that's because of a soft tissue thing based on my workouts or the way I slept last night or whatever.
I will say, though, I will echo that, though, that every time I have an ache or a pain, I do pay a little bit more attention. I don't, if I have something that hangs on for a few days, I then kind of put it on my list of if this is here in another week, I'm definitely calling up the doctor.
Yeah.
And, that's just, I think, a common thing where it's I had a lot of bone destruction. I mean, I lost 6 inches of height. I had 11 fractured vertebrae. I had my sternum had broken a couple times. So
now, is that how you were diagnosed with, was coming to the root cause of these bone fractures?
I will just say for people who are listening and watching, there is a video on my website that talks about my whole diagnosis story, but I had a very delayed diagnosis. It did happen during the pandemic. It was kind of a combination, I think, of the pandemic and my primary care physician kind of gaslighting me. I became bedridden, and she kept insisting that I go for, she wrote me a script for an MRI after I was bedridden, and she said, get to it when you can. And when I couldn't get to it 6 weeks later, we were then in this battle where she was insisting I go as an outpatient for my MRI. And it took months before I was able to get to it. I had to call up another doctor that had helped me with back pain in the city 30 years ago. And we started trying to figure out what drugs I could take to get through the test. So by the time I got to my MRI, which was, I became bedridden in October, and I got to my MRI finally in, I can't remember if it was late February or March, because there was also a delay in sort of getting the test read because she was gone for 2 weeks. By the time I got to, she finally said, oh yeah, you can go to the hospital. She was discouraging me from going to the hospital. She had told me if I went to the hospital, they would just treat my pain and send me to a rehab. She didn't even consider that I had something else. Though, frankly, medical protocol would say if somebody is bedridden for more than a month, there's something going on besides back pain.
Sure.
So, but before that, I had seen her maybe, I'm going to say I saw her about 2 weeks before I became bedridden, and I was complaining about rib pain because I was doing some yard work, and I bent over and I just felt something ripple, it was really wrong feeling. but then I was kind of, I was still able to get around. So, but yeah, the bedridden thing, I would say, Ray, and I don't want anybody listening to necessarily take my story as like the typical story, because it's not, because by the time I was diagnosed with myeloma, I was so relieved because I was bedridden and something was so clearly wrong that I'm just like, what is it? I could have taken whatever it was. So the fact that there was something, okay, it has a name and I can move on to the next step, was such like that is not the normal, I would say, route that most cancer patients or myeloma patients go through, where they find out, I think your story is much more emblematic of what people go through.
I think you bring up a couple of good points. There was a bit of relief for me too. Finally, this unknown ailment. My story started, as you know, with an anemic blood value on a routine blood test. And so trying to find out the root cause of that anemic value led us eventually to a bone marrow biopsy. And then the biopsy came back with multiple myeloma. Through that, it's a long process, right? And the bone marrow biopsy, as you know, is no fun and games, right? And I remember my doctor kind of chuckling, about the look on my face, and it's like, oh, bone marrow biopsy. She's like, what? And I'm like, well, the test comes with its reputation, and it's a well-deserved reputation, right? And it's not a great reputation. And she's like, oh, some people don't even feel it. And I don't know who those.
Oh, please.
I don't know who those some people are.
That is not, Ray, one of my things that I'd like to do with this program is in that area to change the standard of care. Yeah. Like I want to talk about your bone marrow biopsy story, but let me just tell you mine first. So I had a sister who she died of cancer in 2013. I remember her first bone marrow biopsy was like in the 80s when she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. That was the first cancer she had. And she didn't like it. Then my mother had a malt lymphoma in 2002. And I knew bone marrow biopsies were difficult. And so I said, well, I'm going to go with you. And I was like your wife, Lori. I was holding her hand and I nearly passed out. So, and when I had mine, when I was diagnosed at the hospital and they were saying, okay, we have to do a biopsy for you tomorrow, I said, you are going to knock me out. Now, I was in the hospital, but still there was a whole thing. And I went down to interventional radiology. And it was actually, I was in a twilight sleep. So I did kind of know, I was talking to them, but I really didn't feel a thing. And I think that, and I've had one biopsy since then where Mount Sinai, they have in their Blavatnik Cancer Center, they do biopsies with sedations like 2 Fridays a month. And I insisted on that. That one I don't remember. But conscious sedation or twilight sedation is different than general anesthesia. It's like what you get when you have a colonoscopy. And I think that that's something we should demand, because it's not, I know they're all like, oh, it's over really quick. And some people don't really feel it. That is so not true. Everybody I've talked to that has been awake has been uncomfortable. And even if they give you like the topical, and even if they give you a little Xanax, there's no way to numb the bone. But anyway, Please tell me and I ask you this not to scare other patients or their caregivers who are listening, but please tell me about you and Lori and your first bone marrow biopsy.
Yeah, my first bone marrow biopsy, I've had 3 now. 3, and we'll probably have another one coming up here pretty soon. My first bone marrow biopsy was just, Civil War operating room type of style. As you've mentioned, Helena, you can't anesthetize the bone. And the best way to get a bone marrow biopsy is from the kind of like the lower back hip area. There's not a lot of skin tissue before you get to the bone. And so you can, your practitioner can numb the skin, but that's not a whole lot to go into until you get to the bone. And you get into the bone by just good old fashioned pushing a thick gauged needle, and it hurts. I've also been told that the more goo you have in your bone marrow, the more cancer and the like, that maybe bringing that out and is a bit more painful as well. It could be, my second bone marrow biopsy. And when you go through that, it's just you got to grit it and bear it. And it doesn't last that long. That's the good news. And then the recovery is very, very quick. You're walking up and you're out. So there are advantages to that. My second one, my bone marrow biopsy was done with a drill, which is more scary mentally, because you hear this drill. It's like, revisiting my mom's at the dentist, and all that. But I had less cancer in my bone marrow, and it felt less painful. In fact, I had to be reminded that it was over, because I was just all psyched up, for this intense pain trip. And, the woman's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, come on. And she goes, well, we're done. I'm like, oh, good. It still wasn't great. And I want to, recommend it for anyone out there just to experience recreationally.
Yeah.
Although interestingly enough, my sister, who's a doctor, she knew somebody in med school that used to, volunteer for money, but back in the day, it was just a little over $100 to go through bone marrow biopsies as a test patient. And I hope never to be that hungry where I need to get paid $100 or
also, I do think your pain threshold changes as you get older, and most of us myeloma patients are middle-aged or further on. So I will say that, like, what you might do for money in your early years, it's different, but
yeah, my third bone marrow biopsy I was actually put under. I think it was a conscious sedation. I don't remember it, and therefore, if you don't remember it, it doesn't hurt. It was done on an imaging machine as well, so it guided in and all that. But in the recovery, I kind of come to. I have no recollection of it whatsoever. So if you can't remember it, then it didn't hurt, I guess. So that's cool. We'll see what's coming up. One point I did want to get back to, one thing that you mentioned when you're in the yard and, raking and felt like something in your ribs. You also mentioned a little bit earlier about, being gaslit a little bit by your primary care physician. One thing I really wanted to talk about with some patients, and even if you're not a patient, if you're an ally, you will be a patient at some time. I sure hope you listeners and watchers out there, I'm not saying you're getting myeloma or any other chronic serious disease, but you need to go see your doctor, people, and you see him annually, get a blood test. I'm in this journey with Helena from a routine blood test. I felt great. By the time my bone marrow biopsy came back, my bone marrow was 90% cancerous. Silent killers, folks. So many things happen. Go to your doctor once a year. It's an investment that you make in yourself. And when you do talk with your doctor, that object that you felt in the yard raking is pain. But a lot of times you go into a doctor's office and you leave with just a little bit of discomfort, right? It's like, oh, is it pain? Are you injured? Are you hurt? And you get into one of these conversations and you're not really getting the point across as a patient to your doctor's like, no, it was pain. I know my body, and this wasn't discomfort, like I slept on my neck wrong or something. This is different. This is why you went to the doctor. And so, everybody out there, when you go to your doctor, it's a two-way communication street, right? And you have messages internally that you need to externalize and communicate. And you do that through the way you were raised, basically, your skills, your education, your experiences, your values. You pick like a code. I'm going to code up how I feel, and I'm going to shoot it over through my nonverbal communications, through my verbal communications. And your doctor's got to, decode that based on their knowledge, skills, experiences, and values. And we're not all the same. And so sometimes things go over, they get interpreted, decoded a little differently. Then they have a message that they code and send over to you, and you have to decode it. Keep working on it. Communication is a two-way street, and the communication with their doctor is important. Don't let them diminish what you feel. What you feel is real to you. And the medical gaslighting aspect, it's a real thing, folks. I mean, they've got they're overbooked to begin with. They have 15 minutes or whatever. You've got a 25-minute issue. You got to take your 10 minutes that you got to get it across, because I don't want anyone coming in with pain and leaving with discomfort. There's a whole different type of, medical intervention for treating discomfort as there is to treating pain. So to make sure you're getting your point across, an important one for me, at least, and I hope it's important for all you listeners.
Yeah. And also, Ray, I would add for people too, that it's important to push a little bit to follow up on blood work. Like, the normal thing that people have when they go for their physicals is going to be their CBC, their complete blood count, and their CMP, their comprehensive metabolic panels. And sometimes something is off in those. And I know that doctors will look at them and say, well, I'm not going to worry about this result that's out of range because everything else is fine. And these things are interrelated, and there's a way to rightly read them. And many times there isn't anything wrong, but there's also nothing wrong with saying, can we do a more extensive panel? I mean, it's just another blood draw. And, we have, like you said, it's a bit of a silent cancer. And there are other things like this, like, you're not going to catch cervical cancer if you don't go for your screenings. Pancreatic cancer can be very stealthy. But when things are off in your results, it's okay to follow them, like to make sure you look at them again, maybe more recently, or to ask for a more detailed blood draw. Like I know that if that had happened at mine, like, about 6 weeks before I became bedridden, my CBC was fine. I mean, which is shocking to me because I had already broken my ribs. I had the rib thing happen before that, not knowing it. But my CBC was still showing completely everything within range. And if something had just been looked at a little deeper, it would have been a disaster area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And you talk about, you can't catch some things, but you can catch them early in development. And the early treatment of anything is better than a late treatment of anything, right? Yeah. So, yeah, don't, try not to, people out there say, I'm going to put this off. Go to your doctor. It's never convenient. Right. And, the needle poke for a lot of people, I hate needles. Needle pokes, that's not convenient either. But it's an investment in yourself. And what better investment is there in the world, Helena, than investing in yourself? It's not that inconvenient. And a needle stick's not that bad. So make it happen, people. Go to your doctor. Early intervention is the best intervention of them all.
Yep. Now, I would like to ask you, Ray, the details about your induction treatment and also your stem cell transplant. You did you did the transplant. I just had a harvest, but you went through the whole process. Tell me about it.
Yeah, my doctor said, this is typically what we do. Myeloma, kind of the standard induction therapy, Revlimid, Velcade, and dexamethasone. The RVD treatment. Revlimid is a pill, a daily pill of various dosages depending on your need. Velcade's injection in your abdomen, and dexamethasone is at least for me, it was a once a month dose, only a dose only needed when I was getting the Velcade injection, and a big massive dose of that. I think 40 milligrams or something like that. A pretty hefty dose of dexamethasone. So my doctor said, yeah, we'll do that in like 3 to 6 months, and then we'll start thinking about a stem cell transplant. And me being the overachiever that I am, I'm like, great, we're going to do this in 3 months. So I'm jumping into everything, fighting cancer like the way I approached anything else. And, for me, everything I've ever done in my career, academically, athletically, musically, what have you, it's always been some sort of milestone, capstone type of event, right? So there's studying, or there's training, or there's rehearsal, or, working on the deliverable, and there's delivering something, and that's kind of how I approach this. I'm having a stem cell transplant. That's a thing. That's an event. And I'm going to do everything I can to get ready for that and be in the best physical condition. What are the variables I can control? And as you know from reading my book, Helena,
yes,
that lasted.
Let me hold it up for people. I was going to mention it, Ray, but here it is. Me, myself, and my multiple myeloma.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned in the book, that preparation, stage 1 induction therapy, lasted less than 2 weeks. I'm sitting at a PF Chang's with my son and my wife, and I'm just beat. And it's dinner time, and I can't even pick up the menu. I'm just exhausted. And a couple of realizations came at that point in time. And one is that I was approaching my fight against cancer in a non-sustainable type of way. It was all encompassing. First thing I woke up thinking about, last thing I thought about when I went to sleep, and even though I was working full time, it was a thought in my head. I'm as a newly diagnosed patient, for crying out loud. And what could I do? I can work out really hard, work on my physical conditioning, and with that, I get energy to go, source nutritious foods, prepare nutritious foods, and all that. And I began to realize that I was using a paradigm of a capstone event. There was a game day, fight night, performance, a work deliverable, or what have you. Yeah. Every day with a chronic disease is your day. Every day is game day. Every night is fight night. So I needed something sustainable. And I also came to the realization that my whole being was more than just like my physical being. I'm going to be strong and powerful and all this. I had all these, as a musician, it's the mixing board, a little more of this, a little less of that. And by thinking, just, kind of exploring how I was feeling with a growth mindset and an open mind, I said, dude, you're so much more than just your physical body. There's your mental component, your emotional component, your spiritual component. I don't know. There might be some other components too, but for me, that's what I recognized. And any one of those variables, can pull up some of those variables that are lagging. For example, if my physical conditioning is strong, I'll have the energy to go to the market and to buy nutritious foods and prepare meals and so forth. But at the same time, any one of those variables can pull down maybe a more healthy variable. When I was sitting there at that PF Chang's, I was just beat, but a lot of it was like this mental and emotional exhaustion of being a newly diagnosed patient. And so I went to go see a specialist, as part of my care. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bust it out. Let's do this. Let's do the stem cell transplant in 3 months. And she goes, whoa, why? He goes, well, 3 to 6 months of induction therapy and the stem cell transplant. He goes, you might not need a stem cell transplant at all. Let's just, let's not rush it. There's no need to go through it. I'm like, and it dawned on me like, that we don't have to rush it. And it's, I don't have to rush it. You need it when you need it, if you need it.
And they have to look at your numbers too, as you're going along, to figure out when the right time, if you need it, when the right time to pull the trigger on it is, because, it's exactly. It's getting your myelomas down and then being able to harvest enough clean stem cells when you do the harvest part. So the timing for everybody, definitely different. So
and she told me to relax on a little. Don't be such an overachiever. Let's see what the numbers show. And then sure enough, it turned out to be about 6 months. My numbers were down, but I still wasn't MRD negative, I guess, marginal resist. I don't even know.
Minimal residual disease.
There you go. So another biopsy, my second biopsy showed that I went from 90% level to about 10% level. That was great. Then my doctor, my primary oncologist, used a great metaphor. She said, I think it's time. You've got myeloma on the ropes. Let's go for the knockout. And I'm like, that appealed to me. For me, I have a fight against cancer. There's a lot of patients out there who have a journey against cancer, and I think that's kind of the way the communities talks about it a lot, because a fight metaphor tends to suggest that there's a winner and a loser. And anybody who's ever been to an infusion center and seen people piped up to IVs dealing with cancer knows that there's not a single loser in that room.
We spoke a little bit about the fight metaphor in our emails just setting up today, and I just wanted to explain to you sort of my thinking. I'm a non-fight person, and it's okay to be a fight person, whichever. Just because I'm a non-fight person doesn't mean I'm going to live any longer. But the reason I don't embrace the fight metaphor and don't think about it that way is I sort of look at it as like, I've got a body that's made up of about give or take 37 trillion cells. You can have more, you can have less. And this isn't even the bacteria that lives in us. This is just the cells that are what we would consider us. Yeah. And I don't feel like I can mobilize, if I'm thinking about it, to the extent that my thoughts and my feelings may mobilize something in my body. I don't feel like I can mobilize the health that I want if I'm talking to my cells that way. So that's just me. But for some people, it's like I said, doesn't mean I'm going to live any longer. So whatever works for you.
And I think that's the important message to get out to people. It's like, you are you, and you're the best you that you can be. Do what feels right to you. For me, the fight metaphor is, it inspires me. It motivates me. Right. And
yes, you are. I just want to say to the listening audience, Ray is a proponent of punch today in the face.
Yes.
That's your motto, I guess.
Being a musician, I'm always in search of ways of making a little bit of extra money. And one of those ways is with T-shirt at performances. And, you put some sort of attitudinal saying on the back. And punch today in the face actually grew from If Not Now, When. And If Not Now, When grew from me, as I was going through this cancer journey, as I'm trying to get my head around it and changing my paradigm. I think, back when we were kids, Helena, we had this like awe of discovery, right? We didn't intentionally go out and go, I'm going to learn today, but we didn't know anything. So everything that we did experience, we learned, just going outside and experiencing the world. And we started to begin to gain knowledge. We all had this sense of wonderment, of discovery. And then we became teenagers and we knew it all. I'm using little air quotes for those of you who are listening instead of watching. We kind of know it all. And we stop with this, sense of discovery. And for me, I had lived in a bubble, a cancer-free bubble for 54 years. And now all of a sudden as a patient, I was learning so much from my support group and the like. And I wanted to be a little bit more, growth mindset about it. And so it dawned on me that, like a lot of a lot of humans, I think it's part of the maybe endemic of the human condition. I took time for granted. And that time I took for granted, all tomorrows were taken for granted, next week's, next month's, but sometimes it'd be like next year, depending on the topics, maybe in decades into the future, just taking them for granted. They're going to be there. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, how does that present or manifest itself in me? And that was, I took people for granted, because they'd always be there for me because I took time for granted. Like Helena, she's my dear friend. I'm thinking about her, but I'll connect with her tomorrow because she's going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be here tomorrow. So it doesn't really matter. So, it kind of dawned on me. It's like, what are the things you want to do? What are the things that are most important to you? And who are the people that are most important to you? What do you want to do? And who do you want to do it with? And so that led me to the little, motto for the back of the gig t-shirt, if not now, when, and that morphed itself to, as you said, punch today in the face. Today's a gift. It truly is a gift. If you can look at it that way and then recognize that a lot of people did not receive today as a gift, right? So what can we do to honor those people? What can we do to honor ourselves? And what can we do to honor the day? And in my mind, it is just to live, to make the most of the day. And how do you make the most of the day? By doing what's most important to you with the people that are most important to you. And so, the punch today in the face is kind of a metaphor for me. I want to get today's attention. Today was personified. I want them to know that Ray was here, and if you've ever been punched in the face, that kind of gets your attention, so, I want to be able to, what gives me a sense of inner peace and a sense of self-satisfaction is laying in bed at night thinking, I made the most of today, and then kind of peeking over at tomorrow and saying, I'm coming for you next. Those are the thought processes that I have in my head about, living. Because, when you face any serious chronic disease, the road can be bumpy at times, right? It's not all tailwinds and downhill. A lot of times it's headwinds and uphill, but you still have today, and we can't take tomorrow for granted. So what are we going to do today to make the most of it and to feel the best of ourselves?
I want to follow up on a couple of things you said. First of all, I think, from reading your book, I think you have you were talking about how you were taking things for granted. Like you used me as an example, like my friend Helena, but you seem to have a pretty good support system. Not everybody does, but you have your wife, you have your kids. Your kids were basically adult kids, and you seem like you had a lot of friends that came together. So is that accurate?
I am extraordinarily lucky in that I have a team, a tribe that is with me, unconditionally. My wife, as you know, navigating the United States healthcare system can be difficult. The amount of snail mail we get is overwhelming. Understanding insurance is something that just doesn't even click in my head. And, you have all this correspondence with healthcare providers, the payers, the insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and the like. It can be daunting. That's just correspondence, people. Then there's medical appointments, there's medications, there's all sorts of stuff. I used to be one of those people that it's like, how can you not know if you took your meds in the morning? Oh, it's super easy, people. Let me tell you, I absolutely have to have one of those multiple things with, like today is a Thursday, and Thursday morning, my pills are still in there. I haven't taken my pills.
Hey, I got one of those that has the AM PM.
Yes,
like it's the easiest way to go.
And
no like, shame. But it's a tool.
The younger Ray, I'd always be looking at people. How can you not know? I mean, so it's just a naivety. But I am fortunate. I have this team behind me. And, one of the things I like to tell people is, if you know of anybody going through a serious health condition alone, in particular, but even if they're not alone, reach out to them. And they first of all are appreciated, and they probably do need the help. And I also like to tell patients, take the help when it's offered. You might not think you need help, but the people on your team need to help you. I might not need a ride to the infusion center, but I might have a friend who needs to drive me to the center. There's a lot of people out there that need to have some sort of sense of control. And when someone that they love and care for is going through something, and they feel powerless and they don't have control, and that doesn't make them feel good. So help your friends feel a little better. Accept the help when it's offered.
I would say two things on that too, is like the fact that, cancer ghosting like is a thing. There are people who get diagnoses of all kinds and people evaporate. And in terms of being a patient and whatever your caregivers and support system is around you, like I've said this to so many people. I've been in so many forums and done so much research that even no matter how bad you feel, and as you know, when you're going through a stem cell transplant, induction therapy, there are parts where you feel really bad, and there can be some parts later on, but you can always, always, always let your caregivers know that they're making a difference. Like
Yeah.
even when you're weak and you really don't have much of a voice, because that's what keeps them going, and they're such an important part of, your life and just getting through.
They are super important, and sometimes they have the tougher job, more
Yeah.
tough than the patient, right? And
Mhm.
so, if you know people out there who are caregivers, ask them how they're doing, because I like to give the analogy of my wife giving childbirth. Unpleasant experience, uncomfortable, and in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And but I never knew how much that she could go. Where is she at her limits? For me, it's like, is she there right now? She knew, and she could go forth. But for me, here's the person I love, and she's uncomfortable. How much further can she go along? Same type of thing when you turn the tables, right? She doesn't know where I am on my, approaching my thresholds of whatever they might be. Nausea, fatigue, and what have you. And sometimes your mind can play with you. It can be a very exhausting journey for caregivers and allies as well. So, check in on with people. And if you know somebody having a serious issue, check in on them. I know one of the biggest obstacles, you talked about ghosting. Quite frankly, in my mind, I think it's a lot of times people just don't know what to say. So if you don't know what to say, you don't say anything at all. Or maybe you say, oh, I'm going to put it off tomorrow because I don't really know what to say. And tomorrow becomes next week, next month, and so forth. Just start there. Man, I learned that lesson. Just talking in group with people, because patients. I've heard people utter the comment. You find out quickly who your friends are. I'm like, I hope I never share that same mentality, because my friends are my friends for a reason, and hopefully it's not because of my illness or their illness or something else. I just want to for me, I give them the benefit of the doubt. They've got stuff going on in their lives that I don't know about, and so maybe they don't reach out to me, but if I reached out to them, or maybe they just don't know what to say, because I've done that off of silly matters, as I recount in the book. For me, my emotional intelligence is, I hadn't even heard that word, Helena, until I want to say the early 2000s.
Emotional intelligence?
Yes, I am young on my journey of emotional intelligence and the EQ out there, and I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn a lot about it. I know, but I grew up with those values of calm, cool, and collected, and things like that. Not talking about your feelings. That was just the way we kind of grew up. Those are our values, and then just learning that other people have some different values. And when you're calm, cool, and collected, sometimes you're not really completely cognizant of yourself. It's certainly, I think maybe less aware of what's going on with some others because of the need of being calm, cool, and collected. And so learning about this, whole EQ component and trying to understand my whole being more so.
Yeah. I have another podcast that's about grief. And similarly, what you saw in your support group where people say they learn who their friends are or who their real family is, that is kind of a common thing that happens. And as I said, Ray, I think you're certainly not alone in it, but you're one of the blessed people who does seem to have a very good support network where you haven't had to say, hey, I've lost like 6 friends, so that's really wonderful.
I can't imagine going through this alone. I'm so grateful for my wife, Lori, my family, and my friends. Give you an example, my stem cell transplant I had done at Stanford University. For anybody undergoing a stem cell transplant, you pretty much need to be next door to the
you did yours as an outpatient. Not everybody does outpatient, but you did yours as an outpatient. I know I've had harvest, but not transplant. I would try to make mine inpatient just because I think it's so difficult.
It is, I was partially inpatient because during the process, my blood pressure went down, it was popping fevers. And so like the last 4 nights I spent in the hospital, I found it next to impossible to get any rest in the hospital.
I see.
And, so when people say, I want inpatient, it's like, oh yeah, inpatient is something, but, you get vital signs checked every 4 hours. So that includes blood pressure. So that's a blood pressure cuff around you. I don't know I can't sleep through that. And then you're constantly hooked up. You've got all sorts of stuff going through you, IVs, medicines, antibiotics and the like. And each time that IV alarm goes off, it's funny. I've got security cameras at my house that can tell me stuff. The way that the nurses find out that an alarm's going off is they can hear it from down the hallway. It's like, if there's a bubble in the line, if your IV bag is empty or whatever, beep, 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 I found it impossible to get any rest. But when I was talking about leading up to the stem cell transplant, I did mine outpatient for the most part. It was you have to be close to an infusion center, and close means within an hour. Yes. And at the time, I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in the East Bay. Nothing is an hour from anything else within the East Bay. I needed to get over to the Peninsula, Stanford University. And maybe at 2:00 in the morning, you could get over there in an hour, but most of the time it's over. So we were going to have to relocate. Relocating to the Peninsula and the Bay Area is expensive. It's like, well, what are we going to do? You need to have a bedroom. You need to have a bathroom. You need to have a kitchen. So
let me interrupt you, Ray, because one of the things I did want to ask you were mentioning insurance before, and I don't know if this was your insurance low moment, but when you were doing your harvest, the insurance company called you or called Lori, whoever, and said you couldn't do it where you were going to be doing it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
One of these contractual types of things. It's like, we're not going to use Stanford University is no longer part of the network. You're going to need to go to UCSF, which is a great. Both of those are, if you're going to have myeloma or any type of blood cancer, having it in the Bay Area is not the worst place to do it with Stanford and University of California, San Francisco, some world renowned.
My specialist who left Mount Sinai now runs UCSF. So yeah.
Yeah. So, world renowned. So that was, another complication. And thank goodness I didn't have to deal with that. If I was doing this on my own, would not have put me in the right mental space as I'm sitting there going through apheresis and trying to get my cells or what have you. But, the conclusion of this really long story, my friends got together and raised money for us to relocate to a Residence Inn Suites in Menlo Park, which couldn't have been inexpensive, right? But that gave us a place to stay during both stages of induction. We had a spare bedroom where my sister could come for a couple of weeks. Our daughter came for.
What would you have done though if your friends hadn't done that?
It would have been expensive, incredibly expensive. I don't know how much insurance would have covered, if any at all. But I think we probably stayed over the 2 stays, probably 5. It's called another, probably 20 some odd nights of staying, maybe a little bit more, 25. And luckily, we were able to go home. And for me, it was being home for the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, which was great. Shiny new bald head at the time, but it was great to be around.
Yeah. So you had your transplant. Was that medically in your whole journey? Would you say getting out after your transplant or getting clear to go home, was that the high point? What's been the highest point for you in this whole thing?
Well, I think today's a high point, sitting talking to you, a lot of high points, but certainly it was a great to leave. We did, once I got checked out of the hospital, the last 4 nights were in the hospital. It could have just been 2, but the doctor's like, while you're here, let's just go to see if you've engrafted your blood. For me, as my blood pressure was up, the fevers were down. So we don't think you have an infection, but let's just sit here and ensure that, while you're here, let's just make sure that you engraft. And sure enough, blood tests came back. For me, platelets were the first, indicator, like, hey, something's coming back. And checking out of the hospital was great because now I can sleep, because I couldn't sleep there. My sleep was just, I was tired, and I was going to be tired to begin with. So getting out was great. Just like, okay, we're in the right direction, and moving in the right direction. And my attending physician at the time told me, don't look at things day over day, because you're going to have up days and down days, and that might kind of get you down. Try to look at your, progression from the stem cell transplant week over week. And, then you can kind of identify longer term trends. And, there was they say, your full recovery is going to be 6 to 12 months or whatever. For me, it was a lot quicker than that. I don't, when they say full recovery, I don't have the metrics to, say, my physical conditioning, maybe it had been 6 months, but I felt better, week over week, and I started, doing long walks and things like that within a couple of months. And
now,
feeling better.
Is this when you described, is this Beth Baptist? You discovered walking? Smelling the roses?
She's a very good friend of mine, Beth, but she's not the one who introduced me to the 1,000-mile challenge. That was my friend Stacy Hames, who I saw her post on Facebook, like, I'm part of a 1,000-mile challenge. I'm going to walk 1,000 miles this year. And I'm a very metric driven person, Helena. And I was like,
yes, you are.
I could get into that, a 1,000-mile challenge. It's like, well, that's only 2.74 miles a day. Bad news was I didn't see that post until kind of late February. It's like, I'm behind the 8 ball. I got to get going. And sure enough, that first year I did my 1,000 miles, and it was something that just like drove me, and this consistency. It's like, what do I got to do to catch pace, and to get on that 2.74 mile pace to make up for the time I've lost. It was just great. It's still great just to get outside, get in nature. Where we lived at the time in the Bay Area, it's a nice little trail that kind of went by things. Every once I'll see foxes, deers, and things like that. Rabbits galore, until the coyotes took care of them, and other stuff. But it was a great way of clearing my mind. For me, I can write in my head, music and words as well, and lots of stuff to give me time to think, and all at the same time being active. So that 1,000-mile challenge is something I was still proud of. That was 2020. Did it each year. It got more and more and more. 21, 22, 23. Last year, I came into some struggles. I developed a neurodeficit on my left side that presented itself as foot drop. Don't know why. It might have been an old back injury. It may have been a drug that I was taking, pomalidomide, which would be a rare side effect for it, but possible. So we stopped that drug, went into a different line of treatment. I'm better now, but I just barely got my 1,000 miles in last year. And, it's an illogical progression. I always wanted to go more miles at a faster mile per pace, and like my physical therapist last year working on my foot drop was like, that's unsustainable. That you're getting older, you're not always going to be able to do more faster. I said, I know, but for me, you're either growing or you're dying. He says, that's not true. And I'm like, what? I know I've looked into the science, and you're right. It's not true, but it's the, just, one of these, mental obstacles I've got to get over. But, walking's all you patients out there, try to stay physically active, however
you can.
Yeah. You and I are recording this in Myeloma Awareness Month and Myeloma Action Month, and I like to get out on my social platforms and talk to patients, caregivers, and allies, just anybody. It's not just about myeloma, but our body was made for motion. You try to be active, and sometimes, like in group, people talk about just my fatigue. I just want to clean my house, and I'm like, yes, you do, and that's and the way you feel when you can't is very real, right? But don't show yourself a little bit of grace. You might not be able to finish cleaning your house, but you might be able to start, and celebrate that, and like, or maybe do part, like, at least I got the dining room table dusted and some things, cleaned up in the dining room. I can deal with the living room, maybe tomorrow or whatever. But, we tend, there's a lot of people out there like me, look at that completion of stuff. But let's not forget, just celebrate getting started. I have celebrated cutting my toenails. I hope to celebrate that today, Helena, because I looked at them yesterday and needed to be cut, but I had treatment yesterday, and I'm not going to cut my toenails. I know that sounds ridiculous, but celebrate the small things. Today, when I cut my toenails, I'm going to say, yes, I got those done, and maybe it's going to be a little while longer if I cut my toenails again, but at least that's, try to get up every morning, try to get dressed, and try to, just get started with something. I think everybody you'll feel better doing it.
Yeah. And so you said you had Kyprolis, your treatment yesterday.
Yeah, I had Kyprolis yesterday, carfilzomib, I think is the name of the drug. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there anything, I have not been on that. Is there anything that you would want people who are starting it to know?
Yeah, one of the earliest things I learned or was offered up to me in my support group It's a general support group from all cancers. There's a friend of mine, Tony, no longer with us, but he said, chemotherapy tends to have a cumulative effect, and I think I found with my Kyprolis that I get more nausea and more fatigue. I think I just completed my 10th cycle, so that's 3 weeks on, 1 week off for 10 months. So when we started it, it was a heavier dose of dexamethasone, and I think that helps with nausea. I know I want to talk to my doctor in April about perhaps upping my dose of dexamethasone. I also need to talk to her about maybe going back into this other line of treatment that we stopped because of the foot drop last year. That's a pill, and if we're going to go back there, that's great. If we're not going to go back there, one of the things I need to get a port put in, and we need to discuss a port. I'm running out of veins to be able to poke. I'll turn 61 here in a couple of days. I hope to be in this in the long haul. And everybody I talk to loves their port. Interestingly enough, I talked about Tony. I think Tony had complications with his port that led to his passing, which is one of the things that's been kind of like freaking me out about the port. No idea this thing inside me. Part of the stem cell transplant, I had a Hickman catheter inserted in the chest, and those actually have leads that stick out, and I just felt so vulnerable to the whole 6, 7, 8 weeks I had this in me. Again, mental component.
So are you saying Tony, did his port get infected? Did he have an infection?
Yeah, and this is a story I heard not from his wife and certainly not from him, but it's just I tend to recall that some unexpectedly with the port, and all of a sudden he's in the hospital, and all of a sudden he's passed away. But if that's the case, it would be extraordinarily rare. All the patients I've talked to love their ports. All of my care practitioners say, if I was doing this, I would have a port. A port is completely underneath the skin. Some people put some lidocaine on it before they get blood draws and stuff like and infusions, but I mean that's no different than getting a stick in the arm or whatever. But for me, knock on wood, for the last month or so, it's always been a one stick process for me to get an IV in. But there's been times it's been 3, and it's always the most anxiety ridden moments that I have every time I go to infusion is getting an IV started. After that, everything else is piece of cake. I'll repeat what I said earlier. I don't like needles, and I'm getting better at accepting it, but it's not my favorite part. But as you just got to do it, right? So
yeah, I will say my induction, was different than yours. I was on Cytoxin because I was so sick, so it's like I was on a quad therapy, and it was IV. I did get my Velcade. I didn't get it in my belly. I had my shots in the arm, and I would get the Cytoxin through the IV as well as the Zofran and all the other stuff you have to get to. And I will say, because, I had come out of the hospital and then started treatment, the one thing I didn't enjoy, but I mean, I tolerated, is when, they have to put the IV in your hand, like the back of your hand, like you don't really have any other good spots at the moment. But, fortunately my veins, that was only really for the beginning part of my therapy. And fortunately my veins have recovered, and they can, if they can lay off it for you for a while, it does they can get better. But I was considering towards the end of my induction, I was asking about a port. Like, I knew I'd have to keep it clean and have to go in to get it in, but it can make things so much easier because it's just like, hook me up.
Yeah.
So
and then as Cytoxin's no walk in the park.
No.
That has a tendency to catch up with you a little bit later.
Well, I had also I will say, Ray, my again, there's sort of a small array of different treatments that people have, but there are different options. Not everybody gets the same thing. When I had the Cytoxin, as I said, I did stem cell harvest, but I didn't have a transplant. So I was just, doing the injections in my belly and then Mozabil to get it out. So I didn't have any chemotherapy. So the Cytoxin I got during my induction it does catch up with you. I agree with you. And that was one of my issues with having a stem cell transplant, because that's very high dose chemo. And with stem cell transplant, about 10% of people are cured, basically. And then there's this other like 80% or so, and the oncologist can number check me, that have like some response. But then there's another portion of people who, some years after their transplant can wind up with an incurable leukemia or a myelodysplasia syndrome from that high dose chemo. So the chemo can catch up with you. But I was very lucky with my Cytoxan is I was getting a very low dose. Like they said to me, your hair might thin a little bit, but I wasn't going to lose my hair. And I don't even think my hair thinned because it was a low dose. But frankly, I needed it. My light chains, it's in another video, were like well over 2,000. I mean, they were through the roof. So, and like I said, bedridden. I mean, I was very close to, I was probably, if I didn't start treatment, I probably would have been dead within another couple of months easily. So, but
I'm glad you started treatment, Helena.
well, I'm glad they figured out what it was. Yes. And I did. And I will say this too. There's another video up about it. You know, I actually, in between diagnosis and starting treatment, because they wanted to start me right away, I kind of put the brakes on it in order to get a myeloma specialist. I would not say that, like, if, you know, to patients, if you need to start treatment right away, start treatment right away. But you know what? Get a myeloma specialist on your team. This is a rare cancer, even among the blood cancers. We're kind of the minority. There's much more lymphoma and leukemia than what we have. And the specialists, this is all they do. They are like the most brilliant group. They're kind of weird in that this is all they do. But I've never met one myeloma specialist that was not smarter than every other doctor I've ever met my entire life. I mean, they're just very special people. Your risk when you had your fish study done, when you had your biopsy. So I got the impression you're above standard risk. You have a slightly higher risk.
Yeah, I have an aggressive form of the disease, so a higher risk a person. I'm on my I would consider it my 2.5 line of treatment. You know, so
at year 6, this is actually, that's not terrible. Year 6, you're looking pretty darn good.
Yeah, I feel good. You know, I do. You know, I don't know. You know what I like to compartmentalize, and these are the things that I'm doing like right now. But you know, I think for I think all myeloma patients are, you know, perhaps, you know, this is my thought, or, you know, eventually destined toward CAR T cell therapy. You know, a lot of promise associated with that. For those uninitiated, it's the harvesting instead of stem cells, harvest T cells, you know, genetically re-engineer them in a lab and then reintroduce them to the body. And then they go out there and you know, what the problem with a myeloma patient is that, you know, our body doesn't really recognize myeloma as a foreign, you know, entity. You know, genetic mutations look at, oh, it's, you know, this, you know, we'll let it sit there. And so the body itself does not fight multiple myeloma. When you re-engineer T cells, the T cells, you like look at them and say, okay, we're going to get them and escort them out. And you know, a lot of you know, interesting promise there. I think, you know, everyone's trying to. It's expensive, but everybody is trying to get to the point where maybe you can genetically mutate those T cells inside the body in vitro. I think that's the holy grail. And if we can do that, you know, hopefully also the price goes down.
Yes, they are looking for what they call the off the shelf. So because the way it works, and I'm going to assume many people do know about this that might be watching this particular video, is that when they take your cells, they can engineer them for you. So it's like 1-in-1, as opposed to they come up with a CAR T that they can give to everybody. That would be excellent.
You know, I've gone through a stem cell transplant. After my stem cell transplant, I was back on the RVD, or not, or just RV, no D, Revlimid, Velcade, and I did that up until like March of last year, until my numbers started, you know, becoming visible in my blood tests, and that's when we needed a 2nd line of treatment. Started that 2nd line of treatment, but had to stop because of the neurological defect, you know, so I kind of consider myself on, you know, line of treatment 2.5 at this point in time. And, you know, I think, you know, my specialist over at the City of Hope has been out on maternity leave. I'll speak with her in another couple of weeks, but, you know, at that point in time, we'll see, you know, like, do I need another bone marrow biopsy, you know, PET scan and things like that? Do we maybe go back and try another line of treatment? Do we get a port and continue this line of treatment or whatever?
2 other questions for you, Ray. Did you have any trouble with Velcade? You were on that. I got styes from it, and that is a drug that can give you a little bit of neuropathy. How have you tolerated the Velcade?
Yeah, I've been blessed not to have neuropathy. Thank goodness. I'm a guitar player, and that would have been presented some challenges.
Well, I only got it in my feet. You don't necessarily get it in your hands, but I'm glad you didn't have any.
And you know, the side effects for me would the injection sites in my abdomen there'd be a reaction, dry skin, a hardened skin, red splotches, going to a dermatologist, for example, and getting full body scans. What's going on there? And so trying to find, particularly, in the induction therapy, I was getting injections once a week, and so working your way around your abdomen, because for me, the spots would be, 4 inches long to 2.5 inches high, so big swelling spots. Got some body rashes too, but I think that was mostly from the Revlimid, high doses of Revlimid. Those tended to get. I took I took just a regular anti-allergy thing to try to combat those. I don't know if it worked or not, but the dosages went down over time, and then my body, I think, adjusted to it. So when I first started with the RBD treatment, the Velcade, the kind of like the scarring, if you will, on my abdomen, and then the rashes, particularly on my chest and neck, from the Revlimid. But all in all, I considered it, I consider to be, tolerated it fairly well.
And what do you do about Dex Day, your steroid day? Do you have a strategy for that?
I don't, when I first got the induction, we had this massive dose of dexamethasone, but the same day that I get the Velcade, and
you're just getting all those,
Dex might pump you out, the Velcade might bring you down. Here, I did start taking an anti-anxiety drug on day of treatment. I don't know.
Ativan or something else? Lorazepam?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think it is. I think it might have been I think it's Ativan. I just took one last night, and to help me sleep. And I don't know. I think it works, but I take a lot smaller dose now. Like yesterday, I was only supposed to take 4 milligrams, but like I told you, I'm experiencing a little bit more nausea. So without anybody looking, I took another one and made it 8 milligrams. I will talk to my doctor again. It's like, have we cut it too low? Should maybe I go to 12? The first day of the month, my cycle, I get Kyprolis and I get Darzalex Fast Pro. And for that combination, I take 12 milligrams. Even though I'm getting 2 drugs that day, I feel much better than I do the second and third day of my cycle when I only take Kyprolis. And because then I'm just at 1/3 the level of dexamethasone. And I'm so thinking, let's bump it up. But as far as, dealing with the Dex, it's been okay on my eyesight, I think. I don't know. But, getting the Dex hypers, taking big doses, man, I can feel my chest like pumping at night. And, so for me, it's that one anti-anxiety pill. I also, more often than not, take a THC CBD edible. And I think it's 5 milligrams THC. For me, I find it helps me sleep better once I wake up. And I tend to wake up, after 60, 90 minutes. So Dex days, when you get that heart, if you're, for me, waking up, it's like, wake up, roll over, but my heart's pounding my chest, my blood pressure's up. It kept me awake. So I think those are the two things that, for me, tended to work, but it coupled at the same time with a big reduction in the amount. I mean, when I first started this line of treatment, it was 40 milligrams again, and 10 4-milligram pills, which that's enough already.
Yeah, I basically failed dexamethasone for people who might be listening. I have to take prednisone, which is a steroid. And like Ray is discussing, I still have, when I have my monthly treatment day, I get Dara. That's my monthly. I'm not on the Kyprolis. But if that agitation feeling, you're in bed trying to go to sleep and your heart's going really crazy. But yeah, I failed Dex. When I was taking the 40 milligram doses in the early part of treatment, I actually got sent to the hospital because my heart rate went up to 150 and would not come down. And I remember in the ambulance, like the EMT was like standing by, like she was ready. I don't think she was going to shock me, but I think she had a syringe of something she was going to stab me with. And fortunately, they just put me on an IV and flushed the Dex out of my system. And it's like, now it's prednisone is my thing.
I think you get the added benefit of being hungry all the time now, though, huh?
Oh God. I mean, you're an insane eating machine. Which actually brings me in a way to the next thing that I did want to follow up on, though I have not found that like medical marijuana or CBD necessarily makes me an eating machine. Nothing makes me an eating machine the way steroids do. I mean, if you think you get the munchies from pot, no, try steroids. So, I just had posted a video about, my use of medical marijuana and how, it's benefited me. It really helped me with nausea early on. That's kind of what the video is focused on. But it's, and I so encourage, the video I posted in some ways is just about there are a lot of patients who come from different backgrounds and they just have, a negative idea about marijuana and they won't try it. But I just wanted to ask you, because it's been beneficial for you also. Can you say something about that? How it's worked for you, where it's worked for you?
Yeah, for me, I experimented with medical marijuana a handful of years ago before recreational use was legalized in California. It was for sleep aid. I don't sleep well. And I tend to wake up after 60, 90 minutes and then my brain starts working and say, oh, there we go. So I developed a routine where I take it, first of all, you have to experiment with medical marijuana, dosages, frequencies, and the whole like. It's nobody tells you that. So I was just trying to find what's the sweet spot for me. And I started off like 2 milligrams, and I didn't.
I will say, let me just interrupt you. I will say, here in New York, you will get a prescription for kind of the formulation you should take. How much CBD to THC it should have. But even when you get that prescription, there is that thing where you're starting at the bottom and working your way to the effective dose. So that is true. But people do get some information.
Yeah, for me, I started low and kept worked my way to what I consider to be too high, and then found a spot for me. For me, it's 5 milligrams of THC and any CBDs, kind of like a bonus. The THC, for those of the uninitiated, that's kind of like the psychoactive ingredient. There's really 3 types: sativa, indica, and then a hybrid of the two. And indica is the one that's kind of is a strand that's kind of known for making you mellow and tired. Sativa is maybe a little bit more jubilant, and then the like. For me, it's indica or hybrid. Most, I think, for me, it's edibles too. I don't like to smoke. Most edibles tend to be some sort of hybrid component. For me, it's to sleep. I take it before bedtime. By the time I wake up, 60 minutes, 90 minutes later, and kind of roll over, I'm drowsy, and I find myself going back to sleep so much easier. I don't really know what it does for my nausea component because I don't trust THC and CBD only for nausea. I take nausea medications as well, Zofran and Compazine, and you can stack those medications. And so, anything I get is a bonus activity. And I only take my THC, CBD in the evening. So, I'm asleep, so I don't know really what my nausea connection is. But I know this morning I woke up without nausea, so I had that going for me. If there is, this stigma. It's like, oh, it's pot. I want to be a pothead or whatever. Again, as you go through your discovery journey, and I encourage you to go through a discovery journey and approach this thing with a mindset. Think introspectively, but there's all sorts of things that I encourage you to experiment and try. Give yourself grace and allow yourself to feel better. And then like just with your diet, understand, what's good for you and what's not that great for you. And I'm not saying, you can't enjoy a big handful of potato chips, just everything kind of like in moderation, but, sourcing a well.
Yeah. Ray, I totally resonated with you because you did talk, in the earlier part of your book about, I can give up drinking, no problem. That was never been, but sweets, that was the thing where it's like, it's not that I can never have sweets again, but this is not going to be, it's something I have to be more vigilant about. So
and because simple sugars, cells love them.
Yes.
All cells love them. They're instant energy, but all cells also include your fast reproduction cancer cells. That is literally why when you have PET, they are giving you a sugar solution that is tagged. Because it's going to uptake that sugar. The cancer cells will uptake that sugar. So for people, that formulation goes straight to the cancer in your body. And it's not because the formula is looking for the cancer. It's for the cancer. Come here, baby. I need these sugars. So yeah, maybe a little bit of broccoli every once in a while is helpful as well. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy like, a little chocolate Easter egg, coming up to the holiday and the like. So, but I encourage patients to, try to find out what works for you, because your body's going to be different than everybody else's body. And I'm not just talking medications, but just like, do you need a nap? Experiment with a nap, and does that help with your fatigue? Does rest help with your fatigue? And when you're being active, what does being active mean for Helena, to Ray, to you? Just experiment and see what works with you and what doesn't work with you, and then try to validate your experiment too. It's not just one time, but if you find out like a nap changes your entire physical and mental well-being, that sounds great. Try it again, a little longer, a little shorter, whatever. See what it does, see what works for you, and then adopt what works for you as part of your regimen, part of your routine. And if part of it is medical marijuana or recreational marijuana for that matter, try it. If it's something else, if it works for you, if it's helping you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, give it a shot.
Yeah, I so agree, Rick, because it's just, this is, if you're, for those of us who are diagnosed younger, especially, it's a marathon. Even you, high risk, you're 6, you got years to go, and you have to be open to whatever works. And I would say this to caregivers too. Don't, put it all on the table, because you got a lot of life left.
It is I'm glad you mentioned that idea of it's a marathon, not a sprint. For me, I like after my stem cell transplant, I was like, more, and like, hey, whoa, wait, marathon, not a sprint, and and I had to kind of like relearn that again, much like, when I was going through my induction therapy those first couple of weeks. It's like, need to have something sustainable here, slow down a little bit, and tend to your whole body, your whole being. That's one of the things that I, continue to learn. It's just not, how many push-ups I can do. It's like, there's other components to my well-being, my whole being, and tend to them all. And when it came to time to talking about a diet, I mentioned it in the book. Really, you're trying to, from a gardening metaphor, you're trying to create soil that is productive for what you want to grow, your fruits, vegetables, or in our case, healthy body cells. And you want to make it, your soil inhospitable for things you don't want to grow, weeds. Yeah. And weeds for us would be cancer cells. So watch your diet, and I don't know, those of you who might be struggling with a little bit of diet, I love this one book. It's called The Cancer Fighting Kitchen. I believe the author's name is Rebecca Katz. What's great about that book is tons of recipes, but it's like before treatment, during treatment, and after treatment. You can break it into. There's ways that you can help make foods, in particular drinks, a little bit more palatable. Going through chemotherapy, sometimes it just even changes the way that you can taste water. And water doesn't taste that great. It's like metallic. It actually kind of creates a nausea type of feeling, but it gives you ideas on how to spice up your water, because hydration is so important, particularly for myeloma patients.
With our kidneys, yeah.
Myeloma can affect your kidneys, and the medications to fight myeloma can also affect your kidneys. So it's important to stay hydrated. There's chapters for like entrees and big hearty meals, but also like these little things called dollops of yum as a section. Just a little like ice-based drinks. They're cold and they're wet and they taste well. And a lot of times going through chemo, particularly big doses of chemo, stem cell transplants, stuff like that, you can't eat. You don't feel like eating, but maybe just a bite of something, and for me, I found those bites, if they were cool, cold, wet, fruity, flavorful, those are better. I couldn't even imagine dry, chalky stuff. I love a good cheesecake, but I couldn't have had cheesecake or
not during your transplant
or a hard-boiled egg yolk. No way. I couldn't get that down. But try that book. It's a great resource for, whether it's preparing yourself for treatment, whether it's going through treatment, or whether it's recovering from a treatment. It's a fantastic book. I think there might be a second edition out now, but Cancer Fighting Kitchen, Rebecca Katz.
Okay. So, Ray, are you ready for my lightning round of questions?
I love lightning rounds of questions.
These are the wrap-up questions, baby. Okay.
I'm hoping you're going to pick one about Van Halen, Sammy Hagar, or David.
Oh, no, and there's no prizes at the end either, so I'm really disappointing you. So, what is the biggest thing you've learned from having myeloma so far?
A time. And if not now, when, punch a day in the face, do the things that are most important with the people that are most important to me. It's my biggest takeaway. And that's tied with also cancer tends to take away a lot of things. But also at the same time, if you're open to it, it adds a lot of things. And an example I will give, I know it's a lightning rod round.
Okay. They
March
don't have to be pithy. You can go.
March 10th, 2019, I did not have multiple myeloma. I mean, I had it, just wasn't diagnosed. And at that point in time, I had a ton of roles in my life, Helena. I was a father, I was a son, I was a husband, I was a bandmate, I was a teammate, I was a boss, I was an employee. Had all these roles in my life. Each and every one of them, I had these accountabilities and these goals and objectives that were tied to them. You know what? March 11th came around, got diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And you know what changed? Nothing at that point in time. I still had every single one of those roles. Every one of them, they still had accountabilities, goals, and objectives. And then very quickly, I was a cancer patient advocate. I was a cancer patient organizational fundraiser, and all these other roles got added to my life. Some of the most rewarding things that have happened to me in my life, other than getting married and, being a father to my two children, having patients reach out to me from around the world, through the book and through my social media efforts. I converse with people from New Zealand, South Africa, Turkey, Iran. It's the most rewarding experience of my life. Yesterday, I get a message on social. It's like, yeah, we were across the hall from you at the City of Hope getting treatment. I'm like, no way. And it's like, yes, way. And I'm like, oh, I wish you said hello or something. Let's do this together. And you know what? Yes. I'll send you our private contact information in DMs. But yeah, it's, the things that I've learned, do what's most important with the people that are most important to you. That's the treasure in your life. And then also, don't always look at, your serious health condition as a sense of loss. What is the gain from it? Does it offset the loss? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But there are things that come. And these have been wonderfully rewarding experiences, finding other myeloma warriors like yourself. And then, so many people in my group and outside my group, when I needed help, they reached out and pulled me forward. And I committed myself at that point in time or soon thereafter that I want to be that person in the community as well. I have benefited from the trailblazers in front of me. If there's other people out there that need a helping hand temporarily or permanently, needs to be pulled forward, I want to be that resource for them to help pull them forward for patients, caregivers, and allies. And it's been rewarding.
You bring me right to my next question. So, would you undo it if you had the opportunity, if you could? And I don't mean undo it like be cured now. I mean, have it never happen.
What a great question. I would love not to have multiple myeloma.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd undo it because I don't know if I would have learned my life lessons without it. I would have continued on my little bubble.
Mm-hmm.
My fourth book comes out May 6th. That's part of all four of those books are, well, three of those books, certainly. The myeloma book is, well, that was directly related to myeloma, but all four of but three of the books are also related to, if not now, when, things I wanted to do. And, time's ticking away. I think I would continue to take time for granted. That would have manifested itself in taking people for granted. And the rewards that I have from, from our patient community, our caregiver community, our ally communities, been too rewarding. Like I said, I would love not to have, and hopefully one day we'll find it. This book is a fundraiser. It's my create your own fundraiser for the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. All NetWriters proceeds go to it. And, hopefully one day we'll get a cure for this and other cancers. And I would love for that to happen. But no, I know it's a lightning round. I'm rambling.
You said something very early on when we were talking that I also realized when I was bedridden, like I realized beyond a doubt that I am not my meat suit, like that I am something else besides this. Yeah. Like you talked about, and it's like, if I had not been bedridden and so sick, I would not have learned that probably until I died. So that's why I asked that question. But anyway, the next question is, and this is a more esoteric question from my other podcast, but I want to try it out on you.
Yeah.
So what do you suspect is the true nature of reality? Yeah, you thought you were just going to talk about your book. No, I'm asking some other stuff.
Wow. But the true nature of reality. Wow.
If you have a guess, nobody knows. So I'll tell you that part.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows.
That's what I like about this. There's no right answer that we know about now. I don't know the true nature of reality. And it's something that I think about a lot, like, because I love living, Helena, and I can't imagine not living. But I don't really know what like life is. Do we have these parallel, life structures, where, there's always, like someplace right now in another spectrum, another dimension, there's a 12-year-old Ray and he has lived for 12 years and who knows how much longer, he's going to live. But today, right now, I'm at the 60-year-old Ray and talking about that. I don't really know, and from a, reality, I don't know what reality might be, but I know what I want I think what my duty of reality is, and that is to make this world a little bit better for me being in it. And so what can I do, collectively? We're all in this together, and we live in such a weird time. And everybody not everybody, but a lot of people kind of confuse opinion for fact. Everybody's correct and everybody else is wrong. Super divisive. We tend to be uneducated in that, we'll read a bunch of clickbait headlines. And then the danger is if you even bother to click deeper into that, then that's all the type of news that you get fed anywhere. Back in the analog day, you pull up like a treasure of information like the Wall Street Journal. You were your own filter of this incredible amount of data, and you went to where you wanted to go. But now, we are fed based on our past, behaviors. We are fed our news streams, things like that. And so whatever you read, you tend to read more of what you just read. And that doesn't do really a whole lot for your, intellectual horsepower. So we live in this kind of complicated time. And I just want to be productive member of our collective society, because we are all in this together. We all get something. Helena and myself, we have multiple myeloma. And who knows, we might get something else to go along with it. Yeah. And, we're all in this together. We are stronger together as people. And, I want to be a community builder, and I want to be a positive influence. I want to be a positive role model to my family, my friends, but to reach out, like I said, to be helpful and to be productive. So for me, I don't know what reality is, but I know what I want my reality to be. And that is to be a resource. There are times when I need help, and I treasure and so grateful to the people who help me along. And then when I can be a resource and help people along, that's tremendously rewarding. So what reality is, I don't know. I do know that, my perception of where I am is my reality, but it's probably a different reality for everybody else has a differing perception, which is darn near everybody. So maybe we have together we have 14 billion people on the planet, and there's 14 billion different realities. Where do they intersect? And how can I be productive in going forward, as opposed to being deconstructionist and making us de-evolve back to the cave? Great question.
Thank
You're
you.
A good question asker.
Good question asker.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you die, assuming your soul or consciousness lives on, what do you hope to discover or find out? What's
left? What's more? I hope to peek in and follow the ones I love and see what they're up to. I have a 29-year-old daughter, and we have a 29-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old son. I'm so excited to know what they got going on, and deep into the future. But it's where do we go? And I sure hope, I don't know what the afterlife is, but I hope there is some afterlife, because I love living, and I love learning, and I love watching and listening, and I do love talking, as you listeners and viewers know.
So Ray, so once again, here's the book, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma. Where can people find you?
You can find me anywhere. You can literally, I'm on most social platforms, and it's my name, Ray Hartjen, spelled Hartjen. the exception of TikTok, I'm Ray Hartjen 5. I think when I was signing up, I just, my sausage
Whatever number they gave you.
I hit a 5, but I'm Ray Hartjen on all the social platforms. My website is Ray Hartjen. If you are a patient, caregiver, and ally, and there's anything I can do for you, and I mean anything, please let me know. My phone number is in the book.
Yes, it is. I was shocked when I saw that.
Reach out to me. My email's in the book as well. My email is also on this podcast. It's rayhartjen@gmail.com. If there's anything I can do for you, like I said a little bit earlier, it's been among the biggest honors of my life, connecting with other patients. When these patients from this small collection of women from Iran reached out to me, it's like, check that out, man. Forget geopolitical differences, religious differences, and all this. This is human to human interaction, what could be better? It's fantastic. So if there's anything, heck, if you just wanted to say hi, drop me a line, because I'll say hi back, and I would appreciate that. I love the opportunity, and I've met all these great myeloma warriors, like you, Helena. We got something, we didn't ask for it, but we're also not letting it stop us. Onward we go, and together. We are so much stronger than we are individually. When you need a lift, people reach out there and let people pull you forward. And you see somebody else that needs a lift, please consider reaching back and pulling them forward as well. Together we are strong.
So, Ray, any final words for your fellow myeloma patients or their caregivers?
I love you. I love you, Helena. I love all everybody out there. I mean, we are a community. We're special, and we've gone through our struggles, but be grateful for those struggles, for they have made you who you are today. And that is one badass cancer warrior. And, be grateful for the things that you've gone through. Be grateful for the things that you have. Sometimes it can be difficult to do that. But also, unwrap today as the gift that it is. What are you going to do today? What is your intent for today? What are you going to do for yourself and for the people that you love? And if you find that, I promise you are going to find a sense of inner peace. And isn't that what we all strive for? Is this kind of sense of inner peace? You're doing the things that are most important to you. So go out there, live, be good, folks.
Ray, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
Living with multiple myeloma is life-changing. And while it's never fun when we are in the thick of its demands, we often wind up with a great wisdom and an opening of our hearts that others do not have. I hope this video has helped you if you were in the thick of it now. Thank you for watching. Click to join me on another journey, and don't forget to subscribe.